Here's why I believe that Douglas Murray is not a hero, not a new prophetic figure for the West, but instead a hypocrite. Just a quick note before we get into the video: for those interested in developing a regular, consistent relationship with the Quran, definitely check out the Quranly app. The link is in the description box below. So recently, Douglas Murray has been speaking about the West, and in particular, how the West is turning against the West, how Western people are seeing the history of the West in an extremely negative light. And he also suggests that, well, people just, don't even appreciate the good of Western history anymore. According to him, there was a lot of good which is being overlooked. Now, I can appreciate this approach. I think it's fair. I think that every civilization has had its ups and downs, and therefore whenever you study the history of any civilization, you should not only look at the negative aspects of that civilization and the bad that it did, but also look at the good. And when it comes to the Western civilization, sure, there has been some good, but it's been overwhelmingly masked by the negativity of the colonial and imperial period. And there was a lot of bad at the time. However, his point is fair, is that we shouldn't only look at the negative aspects, but we should also look at the positives. And he makes some arguments, which I find are quite weak in regards to this, when he says that, look, if you look at the country that everyone wants to go to, the countries that everyone wants to go to when they leave their lands, the people want to go to the West. People want to move to the West. Why is that the case, he asks? Well, because we must have got things right. And therefore, because of this phenomenon, our history must be good. However, it doesn't logically follow. It can also be, and I believe that this is the case, that we just simply learnt from our history. The West has simply learned from the dark aspects of its own history, and therefore it has evolved into what we know it to be today. However, that's besides the point. The key thing here is, yes, I appreciate his approach. However, Douglas Murray should adhere to his own approach and not have double standards. In other words, not be a hypocrite. Now, why do I say this? Well, because when it comes to Islam, he does exactly what he tells people not to do when looking at the Western civilization. For one, he has very little knowledge as far as the Islamic civilization is concerned and Islam is concerned as a whole. And that's apparent from a lot of his views which are out there on YouTube for everyone to see. He makes a lot of misrepresentations. He caricatures the religion in many ways, building this false narrative in regards to Islam. However, he has a problem when someone does that to the West. Now look, if you were to compare the Islamic civilization over the past 1400 years to the Western civilization, and you were to try to weigh the good and the bad, one thing that will become apparent very quickly is that, sure, there were problems throughout history in the Islamic world. The Muslims never got everything right. They made mistakes. However, when you compare their mistakes to the mistakes of the West, historically speaking, there is no real comparison. However, when it comes to the West, he wants you to take a positive approach. He wants you to be optimistic. He wants you to look at the West in a positive light and the good, or at least appreciate the good along with the bad. But when it comes to the Islamic civilization, he seems to take, again, a totally different approach. Don't be a hypocrite. Apply the same standards to Islam, the standards that you're applying to the West when it comes to the study of the West. Do what you want people to do, and don't do what you're telling people not to do. That being said, I want to conclude on an interesting point. Now, why is Douglas Murray actually speaking about this topic? Why is he concerned? Well, I believe one of the underlying reasons is that he understands and he sees that the Western civilization is unraveling. It's in some ways falling apart. And it seems like from his perspective, this is fundamentally down to the fact that we just haven't understood our history in the West. However, I don't believe this is the case. I believe the real fundamental reason for the unraveling of the West is the fact that we have turned away from God. This is something Nietzsche noted in The Gay Science when he speaks or gives the parable of the madman. When you turn away from God, you lose that foundational anchor through which and in which you ground morality and meaning. Without God, it's impossible to ground objective moral values and duties, and it's impossible to find answers to those deep metaphysical questions we all ask, such as, what is the ultimate meaning of my life? And then when this aspect, if you like, of the human experience falls apart, how do you expect the civilization to stay together? Cultures are made up of individuals. Now, if the individual is falling apart, in this case, without God, there is no God, well, then there is no, how do you ground moral values and duties objectively? How do you find the ultimate meaning of life? You can't have answers to these questions. So when the individual falls apart, the society, the culture, the civilization is going to unravel. And he seems to understand this particular point as well. And hence, therefore, he makes reference to the importance or some important aspects of religion and an organized system. However, I think he is an atheist and therefore a different type of atheist, but therefore he doesn't really want to appeal to religion as a solution or even highlight that the real fundamental issue is that humanity has lost its bearings and grounding because human beings have turned away from God. Anyway, just wanted to share these thoughts with you. And the point is, well, those that are fascinated by him, those that follow him, should also realize that this individual is not consistent and he has double standards. There's hypocrisy in his approach, which is problematic. What does it say about a person who cannot live up to the standards that he wants others to follow? That being said, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Until next time, take care.